Well, good morning, and thank you for that kind applause. I really appreciate it. And also, I want to take this opportunity to recognize General Sullivan. We do this frequently, but it can never be done enough. So please join me in a round of applause for General Sullivan for all that he has done. I'd also like to recognize General Vi and General Ham and many other distinguished guests that are joining us this morning. Thank you, gentlemen, for being out here and supporting the team, so to speak. And I got to say something about that video. Many of you know that I had an opportunity to serve in recruiting command, and we put together a lot of products. Dave Halverson over here, my battle buddy, we did a lot of those efforts, and I thought it was very, very powerful. So whoever was responsible for putting that together, well done and very appropriate. I can tell you that it's great to be back here. I've had an opportunity to brief about these very important capabilities on numerous occasions, and quite frankly, I always take an opportunity to kind of brag about what the team is doing out there in support of the warfighter. But I also want to take this opportunity to recognize General Swan, who has been such an important part of really getting air and missile defense into a greater visibility, or providing a greater visibility. I mean, we have these senior executive forums that we do, just like the aviation folks do. And what it is, it's a way for us to share with many great leaders about what's going on in this community, as well as where we could really use their advocacy and their support, making sure that we get the message out. There's multiple claimants out there for limited resources. We get it, but making sure that all leaders, whether it's on the Hill or across the Department of Defense, that they truly have all the facts so that the decisions that they make from a resourcing standpoint are well informed. But again, I just want to say thanks to Guy and to the AUSA team for really helping us get the word out, and really can look forward to continuing our close relationship. I can tell you that SMDC, our strat, Joint Functional Component Command for Integrated Missile Defense, another hat that I wear in support of Admiral Haney and the STRATCOM team. We've been very, very hard at work trying to make sure that we enhance our capabilities in terms of global missile defense, as well as in terms of supporting space operations. And I'm going to talk a little bit about space operations because, quite frankly, I don't think there's enough awareness of what your Army is doing in terms of space and making sure that we're able to leverage on-orbit capabilities in support of the warfighter. Everybody is aware of the threats that are being posed by our adversaries, the growing sophistication of their systems. They're difficult to detect, more ambiguous, more unpredictable than ever before, and they're growing in complexity. I think it's fair to say, and this is not being braggadocious, I just think it's a statement of fact, that there's not another Army or Air Force or Navy out there that can go head-to-head with the U.S. I think that's a statement of fact as we sit here today. And I think the threat or our adversaries are aware of that. And so they're exploiting every opportunity in a cost-informed, inexpensive manner to go after any kind of perceived vulnerabilities that we may have. When you take a look at the proliferation of missile technologies, cruise missiles, anti-ship ballistic missiles that the Chinese are pursuing, maneuvering hypersonic vehicles, ICBMs with very, very challenging flight profiles. We've seen what's going on in Iran. They continue to get after missile defense or missile research in violation of UN sanctions. And also the ongoing missile tests and the inflammatory language that we hear coming out of North Korea. I can tell you we're also very, very concerned about on-orbit capabilities in terms of anti-satellite munitions that the Chinese are developing, lasers and jammers, and we all are aware of the cyber threat that's out there. I can also tell you that when we're talking about on-orbit vulnerabilities, this is getting the interest of the White House, obviously, and the Department of Defense. DepSecDef is also very involved in what can we do to ensure our ability to leverage those assets on orbit that provide the comms, the imagery, the missile warning, the GPS, the PNT, and all these other capabilities that we rely upon. What I'd like to do this morning, though, and I know that I have a short period of time, and I want to make sure that I allow some time for questions, because I'm sure Sydney out there will have a question for me here or there. First, in terms of missile defense, we work very, very closely with MDA and with the integrated air and missile defense community to continue to modernize our capabilities that we have out there. I think it's fair to say that there's not a lot of appetite for expensive, exquisite programs of record. Rightly so, Congress expects us to maximize, optimize, you use the adjective, our current capabilities that we have, as well as pursuing leap-ahead technologies, and we've been getting after that. Everybody knows about the Patriot modernization. Patriot is going to be with us for many years to come. A lot of our partners have bought Patriot. And so as we add different capabilities like the MSC missile that gives us extended range and covers the gap between PAC-3 missiles and the THAAD missiles, we also have to make sure that we upgrade the other components of the Patriot system that can leverage these added capabilities that we're bringing to the fight. So looking at new radars and other command and control communication upgrades that we're pursuing out there. We also are not just fixated on an interceptor, but we're also focused on how can we do a better job of integrating, and that's where IBCS is coming into play in terms of a network where we're able to leverage Navy sensors or Navy interceptors or other countries' interceptors and capabilities that they bring to the fight, and do so in a more holistic manner, because as you well know, this is a very, very costly portfolio. If you look at the Army right now, air and missile defense, I think, is the fourth most costly portfolio that we have in the Army. So it does take a lot of resources to provide this capability to the warfighter. So it's important that we're as efficient and as effective as we possibly can with these finite dollars. We're also getting after left of launch, and that's probably a phrase that's used often, but probably we don't put enough meat on the table when we talk about left of launch options. And what I'm talking about that is, if you look at our missile systems and our capabilities right now, we're kind of focused on the terminal phase of flight. You have the boost phase, the mid-course, and the terminal. If you look at our systems that we have, whether it's Patriot or THAAD or Aegis ships, we're kind of focused on the receiving end of the calculus problem. We have to expand our perspective, and that's the reason why we're not only looking at the boost phase in terms of directed energy capabilities, but we're also looking at left of launch. Many of you probably heard General Jacoby in recent testimony a couple years ago talk about we need to get after ISR. We need to have a better understanding of what is going on the ground in terms of threat indications and warning, threat intentions. Because quite frankly, if you look at the calculus problem in terms of number of interceptors versus threat vehicles, we're on the wrong side of that problem. We will never have enough interceptors, so we have to look at it more holistically, and we have to leverage ISR, and in some cases consider taking other type of options, attack operation options, to reduce the number of rails and launcher systems that are out there to make it a little bit more of a fair fight. We're also looking heavily at how can we do a better job of integrating our allies, and that's another phrase or point that we use a lot, but what we're trying to do now is put meat on the bone. A lot of the challenges that we've had in the past with integration of allies into the network is data sharing, proprietary of some of the data, the network information out there, as well as the security issues that are associated with it. So we're working through that, and we're working with OSD policy very, very closely to better integrate our allies into this arena. Looking at homeland defense, that's one of my primary responsibilities. I kind of am responsible for the global missile defense, the integration across the globe, so to speak, but also on the upper tier systems like the GBI program that we have up at Fort Greely and at Vandenberg Air Force Base. Want to make sure, as I talk about this capability, that everybody in here understands that that system is manned by National Guardsmen. and has been so for many, many years. These are soldiers that are up there 24/7, 365, that protect this country, that provide this country's only, I say again, only capability or only defense against any kind of intercontinental ballistic missile originating in Iran or North Korea. A lot of folks don't know that. It's soldiers that are doing that. We work with the partners and the other services, but it's your soldiers that are out there on point. And not to belabor the point, but many times this time of the year, it's like 60 degrees below zero up there. So again, just a special shout out to the National Guard and what they're doing to help us get after this problem set. Right now, we're working closely with MDA to improve our capabilities out there. A couple years ago, the SecDef made the decision to increase the number of interceptors. Right now, we have 30. We're growing to 44 interceptors, and right now we're improving some of the missile fields up at Fort Greely to increase that capability to give us a few more arrows in our quiver. We're also working on some upgrades on the C2, the command and control software that we use to employ this system. Working closely with MDA, very, very excited about MDA's recent EXO atmospheric kill vehicle test that took place using alternate divert thrusters, increased discrimination capabilities so that you're able, in a threat complex, be able to find that warhead and go after the warhead versus the debris. MDA also is hard at work improving the sustainability, the reliability of the interceptors that we have in the holes right now, and making some upgrades to the current fleet. Most excitingly, though, what they're really getting after is a leap-ahead technology called the multi-object kill vehicle. And what that does, using one GBI, being able to engage and address multiple threat environments with a single GBI. And many times when threat missiles are shot, it's just not one re-entry vehicle that's coming our way. There might be multiple. And having one GBI being able to address multiple threat sets is a key capability that we're pursuing. And again, MDA is on the lead for that, and we're very, very excited about that capability and really augmenting what we already bring to the fight. But it's more than just interceptors. It's also sensors. And being able to be as efficient and as effective with our limited number of interceptors is key, and that's what sensors do. Right now, we're making arrangements to put the long-range discrimination radar up at Clear Air Force Base in Alaska. And what that will do is we'll be able to be as efficient as we can with those GBIs to really give them the necessary fidelity in the data to really prosecute the threat in the most efficient manner possible. So very, very excited about this discrimination radar that's going to go in there. It's going to augment the other sensors that we have on orbit as well as terrestrial sensors that are out there. We expect that will reach its technical capability by 2021, as we also are upgrading other sensors across the world. Exactly what we need to be doing, quite frankly. It's also worth mentioning about our efforts in terms of the European phase adaptive approach. Many of you are aware of that effort. We're looking to reach an operational capability for our Romanian asset, or our assets in Romania, excuse me, this summer, working closely with NATO in terms of acceptance. And then we expect to have the Poland facility stand up by the end of 2018. Will significantly enhance the security of Europe as well as our NATO partners. Talking about partners and allies, talked about the importance and the imperative of working with our allies. We're also trying to maximize and in some cases expand the number of exercises and training events that we have with our partners around the world. Many of our COCOMs, as you're aware of, are already executing different types of exercises. We're trying to expand upon that. And we're also trying to really do a better job of evaluating cross-COCOM factors that are very, very important. I think we all are in agreement that if something happens in one part of the world, it probably has implications or may involve other parts of the world. So we're looking at how can we do a better job of cross-COCOM type exercises and getting after that. My own command supports STRATCOM in hosting Nimble Titan. Many of you have heard about Nimble Titan. Again, I do that on behalf of Admiral Haney, and that's where we bring in nations around the world to talk about these heady issues, these very sensitive issues related to ballistic missile defense and some of the policy implications, and kind of breaking down some of the barriers that may be out there in terms of some of the sharing of data, and again, continue to make great inroads in that area. We'll tell you that this last iteration of Nimble Titan, we had over 23 countries, a lot of our NATO partners, Gulf cooperation state partners were involved in that exercise. Japan, South Korea, Australia, you name it, everybody's coming into the fight. And let me tell you, this is not just necessarily kind of a gentleman's discussion. We really get into the weeds, and we really have some very challenging discussions. And it's amazing. You get all these military leaders together, as well as some of our policy leaders, and we really, again, have some lively discussions, which is good. And I think it does a lot to really expand our relationships. Looking at more internally at the Army, I think you're all aware that we need to reduce the stress on the force. The DepSecDef has been intimately involved in what can we do, has really charged the Army to come back to him on what we can do to relieve the stress on the force, the Patriot Force primarily. The Vice Chief of Staff has also been involved in leading that effort to make sure that we provide the DepSecDef with our thoughts in reducing the stress on the force. Many of you are aware that what we're trying to do with the Patriot system is, again, optimize that capability. And the way we're going to be doing that is using dismounted ICCs, Information Command Centrals. That's the brain trust of a Patriot unit that really gives the firing direction to the different batteries. Well, in the past, whenever we had to employ Patriot, we had to send the whole battalion set to do that. If you only have 15 battalions, you run out of Schlitz very, very quickly, especially as you're supporting other rotations that are out there. With these dismounted Information Command Central components, we're more able to kind of componentize, probably a bad term, but that's what it is. Basically, not having to send the whole battalion, but parts of the battalion, because it will have the necessary command and control capability to execute the fight. And again, we'll expand our capability across the globe. That also helps us in terms of reducing the stress on the force. We're also looking at committing a test detachment to follow-on efforts, whether it's software upgrades, hardware upgrades. In the past, we've had to devote an operational element, an operational battalion, to continuing our test and development efforts. We're going to get away from that. The Army, in this day and age of declining manpower, has made the decision to go ahead and foot the bill for additional manning to create a test detachment that will allow us to get after the developmental activities that we need to pursue. We're also looking at pursuing some new technologies in addition to optimizing what we currently have on the team, but we're also looking at new technologies. I think if you saw in the third offset strategy, transitioning or augmenting or complementing our current active defense capabilities with more network-centric capabilities, like I talked about before, pulling in multiple sensors and shooters, but also looking at directed energy, helping us to get on the right side of the cost curve, because right now you just can't buy enough interceptors to get after that. So we're pursuing directed energy, electronic warfare capabilities. Internal to my command, as many of you know, we have the HEL-MD, the High Energy Laser Mobile Demonstrator. We'll tell you that when we had General Odierno come out and visit us, and we took him around this vehicle, and he took a look at it, his first question to me is, well, can we deploy tomorrow? He was so excited about what this directed energy capability brings to the fight. And I told him, yeah, we could with a little bit of risk because it's kind of a prototype. Well, we're expanding upon this capability. And this right now represents a 10 kW. We're pursuing other efforts, different chassis platforms, looking at 50 to 100 kW. You really have to get into the hundreds of kilowatts if you're talking about cruise missile defense. But we're trying to make sure that whatever we're doing internal to our commands or my command, that we're also well nested into our other Army programs that are taking place out there at Fire Center of Excellence, like the IFPC program, the Indirect Fire Protection Capability Program, and some of the directed energy block upgrades that we're looking at in the future. So we're trying to make sure that we're working together, being as efficient as we can with our resources, but leveraging this technology that's coming to the fight. This kind of technology, what we're looking at is UAVs. We're looking at small, low-tier assets, low-flying assets. We're also looking at cruise missiles as we increase the power output, the beam control, and all the other associated components that make this capability effective. Break. What I'd like to do now, if you don't mind, is to kind of transition to the other hat or the other side of the house that I'm responsible for, and that's in terms of space operations and what we provide the warfighter. And when I say warfighters, I'm talking about every service warfighters, space operations, on-orbit capabilities that we have out there. You can look at the screen right here. I can tell you the environment in space is becoming more and more congested and contested than ever before. And with that comes the risk to supporting the warfighter, the freedom of action that is necessary by that warfighter to be able to execute these operations, very complex operations. In recent testimony, the SecDef, and I'll read this, in the past, space was seen as a sanctuary. However, new and emerging threats make clear that that's not the case anymore. We must be prepared for the possibility of a conflict that extends into space. And that's very serious. And when I say that, when you think about how we rely on space-enabled capabilities for all things that we do in our walks of life, whether it's financial, communications, the imagery support that's required, the International Space Station, which we have to move from time to time because of all the debris that's up there flying around. Your Army, SMDC RSTRAT, is heavily involved in that. Right now, we're participating in a DepSecDef-led effort called the JICSPOC. It's the Joint Interagency Coalition Space Operations Center. Big term. What that is all of the community that's involved in space and what we do in space coming together, whether it's Department of Defense, the interagency, later on our coalition partners, and especially the intel community to better understand what might be at risk, what are threat intentions, and more importantly, how do we get after it? So there's a lot of scenario development that this operations center is really looking at and feeding that kind of lessons learned to the folks that execute operations, the Joint Space Operations Center out at Vandenberg, feeding those lessons learned to that operational center out there so that we can make sure that we can always rely on those on-orbit assets. The command that I represent also is very, very involved in providing SATCOM support to warfighters throughout the world and all the way up to national level leaders. A lot of folks don't know that. It's your soldiers that are operating the payloads in orbit. And a lot of folks, the great Air Force partners that we have, a lot of folks think it's the Air Force that is providing that SATCOM, whether it's wideband or narrowband support to the individual warfighter down there. No, it's your soldiers who are located at operation centers around the world that provide that bandwidth daily in support of a fleet transiting the Gulf or a soldier that's out there in harm's way. And so again, just a shout out to those soldiers that are out there. The Army is the biggest user of space-enabled capabilities. If you look at a BCT, almost 80% of the systems that are employed by a BCT rely on space-enabled capabilities, whether it's GPS, PNT, you name it. And again, I don't mean to belabor the point, but as General Sullivan was talking about, a lot of folks, especially within the Army, aren't aware that it's the soldiers that are employing these systems and providing that capability to the warfighter. In addition to providing that SATCOM support to the warfighter, we're in a lot of agreements with different countries, and I'll just name some other countries that are helping us with developing or paying for the constellation, the wideband global satellite constellation that we have up on orbit. We're in partnership with Australia, New Zealand, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Luxembourg, and we're also looking to form additional agreements with Norway, Belgium, and the Czech Republic. So again, over the horizon, beyond the horizon, support, SATCOM support is extremely important. But it's more than just technology. It's more than just buying new stuff. It's also how can we train our soldiers to make sure that, number one, they're able to identify when they're in a congested environment, when they're being jammed, whether it's SATCOM, whether it's GPS, whether it's PNT, and how to work through it. And so what we've done in the command is develop space kits that we can use at home station training and also at the CTCs, where we can realistically replicate a jamming environment. And so folks are able to understand that and be able to work through it and continue on with the mission. So kind of funded these out of Hyde, but part of our Army space strategy that has been approved by the Army, we're looking to get a little bit more support to put more of these kits out there across the formations. We're also putting folks out at the CTCs to make sure that the scenarios that are being evaluated against truly replicate or represent the environment that our soldiers are going to be faced with in the future. Just a couple more things, and I'll open up the questions. I'm sorry, I'm kind of passionate about this, so when I get on a roll, I don't want to stop. But internal to our command, not only do we have the operations side of the house, not only are we focused on the future warfare and the development of new capabilities, but we're also focused on new technologies. And one of the new technologies that we're getting after is nanosats. A lot of different services, even West Point is looking at nanosat technology. But what this does is it provides that warfighter in very austere environments to have responsive, timely SATCOM beyond line of horizon, or beyond horizon, support for his operations, as well as imagery support. We've already launched 3 of these back in October. We're doing the system checkout on orbit. And what this does, though, is, again, it's a low-cost way of populating a constellation in low Earth orbit to be responsive to that warfighter. Because as we all know, when you go into certain environments, sometimes it's a little austere and doesn't have necessary infrastructure that is required. So we're getting after this. OSD is excited about this. We're getting support from OST's sponsors to help us really evaluate this technology, and then again, decision makers will make the decision where this racks and stacks with all the other priorities that we have out there. But this is something that a lot of different services are really pursuing. And again, it's more than just SATCOM, it's also imagery, being able to provide that warfighter what's on the other side of the hill. 1.5 meter resolution is what we're talking about right now. Again, a great capability. Okay. I've kind of shamelessly plugged what I do or what my team does. So what I'd like to do right now is to, number one, say thank you for listening to me and to coming out. Also, I'm thanking you in advance for your advocacy, for making sure that you share with whomever you come in contact with about what your Army is doing in terms of not only missile defense, but also space. So God bless you. Open to questions. Okay. Okay. Are our missile defense and space systems secure versus jamming? And can we use jamming? And can we use jamming in electronic warfare to, get after the enemy's kill chain? This is an area, quite frankly, like a lot of different areas that the Department of Defense is really focused on: cyber protection, vulnerabilities. I can tell you that missile defense, working very, very closely with Missile Defense Agency in my command and other commands, quite frankly, are looking very, very hard at this. and making sure that not only our current systems are protected, which we feel they are today, but that we stay abreast of threat capabilities and technology evolution that's taking place out there, so we stay ahead of the threat. Making sure that we have not only the necessary monitoring capabilities on our networks, but also how do we respond. And so that's something that's receiving a lot of interest in terms of using this kind of technology, whether it's electronic warfare or whatever. There are a lot of programs out there. There are a lot of SAP programs out there that are looking at this capability, and quite frankly, I can't really go into a lot of detail about that, but I will tell you that your Department of Defense is looking very, very closely at the capabilities that we can leverage, these non-kinetic capabilities that we can leverage to go after threat capabilities that are out there across a wide spectrum of systems. So I'll kind of leave it at that. Lieutenant General Mann, can you update us on the status and timelines of the JICSPOC? What it's doing so far? What operational capabilities do you expect in the near and long term? Yeah, this system or this capability was stood up last summer at the behest of DepSecDef. Admiral Haney, my boss, the other side of the house, has been intimately involved, as well as General Hyden, Air Force Space Command. And we just had a meeting, I guess, 2 months ago at Schriever Air Force Base. And what we're doing right now is we're building combat power, quite frankly. We're looking to possibly put this operation out at Schriever Air Force Base. At that meeting, we had a lot of folks from the intel community, as well as some other agencies that are a part of this. And so what we're doing, we've already done a couple scenario runs. We're looking at some additional scenario runs, more complex environments in the near future. So we're still, quite frankly, building combat power. I see that the JICSPOC, quite frankly, is kind of like a battle lab. And it really helps us look at what threat capabilities are out there and what is the threat pursuing and how do we address threat advancements. But I also think that in addition to the developmental side, the scenario analysis side, I think we're also going to see the JICSPOC providing also down the road possibly an operational capability to augment that's already provided by the Joint Space Operations Center that's out there at Vandenberg. Those decisions have yet to be decided upon, but that's one of the proposals, to go and make sure that we really leverage this JICSPOC to not only help us with the developmental side of the house, but also help us with at least informing the operational side of the house in terms of how we respond to threats daily, whether it's electronic magnetic interference, EMI resolution, or possible threats to on-orbit assets. Okay. I guess I lulled you into submission. But anyway, I just want to say, again, thank you for hearing me out, and for all the veterans that are in this room. On behalf of me and my family, I just want to say thanks for giving me my way of life. So God bless you. Thank you.